I had a woman tell me one day, and she said to me, my wound of religion was that I have been the pastor's mistress.
Wow.
That's some heavy stuff. So how does that pastor get up and talk about domestic violence or truthfulness and honesty when you lying every day?
Christian folks, and they'll tell you after your loved one is up here and they're being viewed, it's okay, they're going to a better place. I oftentimes struggle with, am I trying to get people over this moment versus allowing them to go through this grief?
You don't have to be like so together all the time. Because I think as pastors, we have a certain place where we can let it down versus where we can't. And that's a whole nother episode right there, right? It has been a long process. The person has still not been prosecuted, but they're in maximum security, but he's not been found competent.
Hey everybody, this is Reverend Kenneth Young, the Program Director of the Black Ecumenical Council of Massachusetts. This work is administered by the Massachusetts Council of Churches and empowered by the Lilly Endowment. And we are so glad and we are so grateful to be here, the MLK Community Presbyterian Church. And we are going to interview none other than Reverend Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery, Dr. TLC, as she's known here in these parts. And we're excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, welcome. This is a few interviews in of our Sound The Trumpet interview. And we've been doing these interviews with pastors and preachers in the New England area. One reason is because we want to make sure people know there's churches, black churches in New England, historic black churches as well. And so just kind of open up, just tell us about who you are and where you're from.
Well, where I'm from is Mississippi. If you want to get real with it, I was born and raised in Mississippi, and just through schooling, I ended up in Connecticut, where I still actually live, and I pastor the church here in Springfield. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation about black churches, particularly in this part of the country.
Right. Now, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper because Mississippi to Connecticut is a big transition.
Absolutely.
How did we get from Mississippi to the Northeast?
Well, because I went to school at the great Howard University, the #1 HBCU.
You HU? I didn't know that.
Exactly.
Okay, come on,
so
Bisons.
I went there. And then when I went for my PhD, I ended up in New York and Long Island.
Okay.
So I was looking for a job. And once I was looking for a job when I was finishing up, I moved to Connecticut, got married. That was the end of the story.
Okay.
And then for me, I'm a licensed psychologist, as you know. I thought that was the call. And God is such a prankster. And then I got called to ministry. And I just remember just sobbing, and sobbing, right? And I said, what does God want from me? I'm already doing service because, as a psychologist, and I was working with disenfranchised youth who were adjudicated, psychiatric hospital, underrepresented populations, which I loved. And so I thought, well, what does God, want from me? I'm already doing service. And this clergy sister said to me, but what more can you do as a minister that you can't do as a psychologist?
Wow.
And that's been a part of my life, and just pondering that. And, as a Presbyterian, for a while, I would drive from Connecticut to New York to pastor every weekend, because there are not that many black Presbyterian churches in New England. In fact, we are the only one in our presbytery, the only predominantly black church. And so for a while, I went back and forth to New York. And then I pastored a predominantly white church in Connecticut as their interim pastor. And when that was done, I was like, okay, I can chill for a minute. But Martin Luther King needed a church. And again, there are not very many black pastors. I came here. I was their interim pastor. I served as pulpit supply, and I just fell in love with the church. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I pastor in the area.
Okay, so you said a whole lot.
I
We know that you're the
did.
Reverend Doctor.
Yes.
And you talked about psychology. But your doctoral work is in psychology, correct?
Yes, it is. And I know that most people hear the doctor and they are used to theology, but I'm a licensed psychologist. And what I find is that there's such a merger and there's a need for us in the Black church in particular to talk about mental health. And so I try to do that as much as possible. I think that, you know, my girlfriend heard a sermon I did when I first was ordained. She said, I feel like I've been to therapy and to church at the same time, because whatever points I'm given, I'm dealing with the psychological parts as well. And I'm so very conscious when I am writing my sermons. If I say anything that I think someone who is mentally challenged may misperceive, or if I say anything even around the sacrifices we make and how we have to go out and just give and love and do all those things that Christ calls us to do, I also will address, though, things like burnout. I will address how we as Black women take on this badge of honor and we don't think about ourselves. So when I am preaching and when I am teaching, I try very much to hear in my head the stories that people tell themselves so that I can sort of correct that even in the sermon, right? I'm being very careful. And for instance, if I talk about things like mental illness, I am very clear to talk about the power of prayer and the fact that medication is often required as well. So that's the way that I use my training to work together. And I talk about trauma. That's important for us to talk about trauma. I talk about we're not going to engage in spiritual bypassing because we're really good at that in our community, right?
Hold up, because you're saying a whole lot.
I know.
And I don't want our audience to like misunderstand, because these words that you're using could be new for a lot of people that's listening. And that's why I'm so excited that we're having this opportunity to share spiritual bypass for me. And you can correct me, because that's not what my work is. It's not in psychology. But when I think about this, and I've had a few questions around this moment of when we don't say funerals, we say celebrations, or homegoings, right?
Yes.
And the preacher, or, good, kind-hearted, loving Christian folks, and they'll tell you after your loved one is up here and then they're being viewed, it's okay, they're going to a better place. And we, sometimes the preachers, come on, clap your hands, let's shout, give them a good. And for me, I oftentimes struggle with, am I trying to get people over this moment versus allowing them to go through this grief? And I see that maybe that's me pushing spiritual bypass on folks. Help us, is that?
That is a perfect example. And I know that we want to celebrate when a person is going from this life to the next life. And it's also okay for us to be honest with God. This hurts right now, God. I had a sister who died from cancer, and I would pray for her healing. And at the same time, you know how they teach you, well, healing is also when they die and they transition. Well, God, that's not what I want right now. And I'm very transparent with God. So one of the things I teach people is be transparent with God. Yeah. This hurts. This stinks that person is no longer with me in the flesh. Yes, God. I am happy. I'm happy that my sister, like when my sister left this plane, because cancer was so ugly, I was happy that she was no longer in pain. And I was also excited because I said, she already knows what it's like. And at the same time, I cried often. I dealt with my grief and said, like, a limb has been torn from me.
Wow.
And to be able to express that, I remember a few sermons a few years ago when we were preaching. It was around Easter. Actually, it was Resurrection Sunday. And I preached about grief or maybe it was a couple of Sundays after that, because it was the road to Emmaus. And I was talking about the disciples not recognizing Jesus.
Right.
And I said, that's because they were in grief. And there are 16 different types of grief. And I was able to go and to talk about that, because one of the things that we're very good at is celebrating and being in church, and all you have to do to call the name of Jesus, and folks are up and yes and hallelujah, and then they go back home in their tears and in their pain and in their lack of self-worth and all of these things. Well, God wants us to deal with the issues. David cried out to God all the time. David was real.
Right.
David was like, look, God.
Jeremiah?
Right, yeah. Jeremiah, for sure. So I think that we do a disservice when we don't recognize at that funeral that people are in pain. And I know as a pastor, when I will ask people how they're doing after, they've buried a loved, well, I'm doing fine, Pastor. I just give it to God. Yeah, okay, and you don't have to be like so together all the time. Now, I know I'm one to talk, because people might say the same thing, because I think as pastors, we have a certain place where we can let it down versus where we can't. And that's a whole nother episode right there, right? But it is really important for us to say to people, this stinks. Yeah. This does not feel good. Yeah. And I think that that's what I appreciate even about the work that you all do, and how at Sound the Trumpet, we've had those opportunities to talk about those things. Or in other venues I've been in, I've had pastors to ask me to speak on mental health at conferences, and people who are watching have reached out to me. Other pastors have reached out to say, thank you for saying that, because we need our space too to be able to deal with things.
No doubt. So we need Jesus and a therapist. Because Jesus was a healer, right? Yes.
And you had to go somewhere. Jesus didn't say that you have to come to me for everything, right? Yes, we need Jesus and a therapist as well. Wow. And I was even thinking about how, when the sons of Zebedee, when the mother came, because I'm getting my sermon together for for Mother's Day, when she came and asked, could they sit on the right and left of Jesus, he said, it's not mine to give. Yeah. Everything Jesus ain't going to do for you, and God is not going to micromanage your life either. You got to do some stuff for yourself.
Jeez. That's good. Oh, yes, we gonna keep moving, because we can stay here. We can be preaching. And so I will say this, because you are promoting mental health in the church. And I think sometimes, as you stated, we want folks to shout. We want people to come to the altar, which I think is all good for your mental health. There's other work that we need to do as well. And by saying this, I'm going to ask you this question. It's going to be kind of heavy, because we've had some past deaths here recently of seeing Black men take the lives of those who are closest to them or close to them. And for many of us who may stand in the pulpit, especially males, how do we handle those issues and that particular trauma, especially if we're not trained? For me, I know it's a minefield. If I say this, I may do this. If I say that, I may trigger some folks. So can you help us handle some of these hard things that we are trying to come up with?
How much time do we have?
Tell us where to go get some resources.
So exactly. So this is the first thing, particularly that I would say to male pastors, is to be able to call violence, domestic violence, what it is. And one of the things that we have seen happening is that there's this conversation around it's a mental health issue. Yeah. It's not just a mental health issue. In some of those cases, it might be, but plenty of folks have grown up in homes with domestic violence. There's no mental health going on, and every person who has a mental illness doesn't beat on their loved ones or kill them. So that's why I don't want to rush too quick to say that it's a mental health issue. What I want men to do is to own that they've been socialized to treat women in a certain place, in a certain way. And I think that's where pastors come in to play. Because if we want to really get real, I don't know how real we want to get with this.
Yeah.
But if we want to get real, the Bible has been used to subjugate women. In churches, women are subjugated. And we even fall into it now. Not me personally, but we fall into the way we have to honor men. And if it's a male pastor, they're treated in a certain way, etc., right? So until we start to change our mindset, until men start to change their mindset about where you all see women, you can't preach something from the pulpit that you have not internalized yourself, because otherwise it's performative.
Yes.
So it takes, if you want to be able to have a conversation, call her sister up and say, I'm thinking about saying this in the pulpit. How does this land with you? So that's one of the things that I would say. Secondly, I would say if men acknowledge this socialization towards, patriarchy and what it means for them, just talk about personally your experience with it. Because when I hear your experience with it, I might say, well, he gets it a bit, right? Acknowledge that it might be triggering. Call the men folks to task, because one of the things that happen in churches, before I was doing Dismantling Racism, I was really doing Wounds of Religion, because I have had women folks to come to me who are being abused by the pastor or somebody in church. And we cover that stuff up until we can deal with what is actually happening in our churches. We can't help anybody out there. Otherwise, it's just words. I had a woman tell me one day, I was doing a talk on the wounds of religion, and she said to me, my wound of religion was that I have been the pastor's mistress.
Wow.
That's some heavy stuff. So how does that pastor get up and talk about domestic violence or truthfulness and honesty when you lying every day? And so, look, I know we're going, you said deep, but this is the real stuff.
It is.
When you ask me a question, you're going to
get the real answer.
We got to get the real answer. And so I know that it's difficult to get up from the pulpit and talk about this. But we also, for me, whenever I get up to talk about war violence, domestic violence, this patriarchy, I talk about how the Bible is used in ways to support that. And if we were to really look, this is going to make some people upset, but if we were to really look at the Bible itself is separatist, because it starts out talking about there's one group of people who were chosen over the other. And then those people use their violence against other oppressed people to justify it. So how do we begin to deal with issues of war if we can't even talk about how it's being used? But we're afraid to do that because we think that if we turn that Bible over, if we question what is written in the Bible, that we're questioning God. No, we're questioning religious institutions. We're questioning the putting together of that canon in ways that supported the narrative. Isn't that what we do when it comes to racism in America? There's a narrative that's been told. We've been taught it in the history books, and everything around us supports that narrative.
You're right. No, I mean, I think this is good. I mean, this is good work. I think this is places that we are struggling with within our black church. I mean, I'm just going to be honest.
Absolutely.
We are great at preaching.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we're probably, I'm biased. I'm saying when it comes down to preaching and performing.
Yes.
It's in the black church. I mean, every Sunday.
Exactly.
It's a full-on performance.
Exactly.
Like, you can see a musical every Sunday. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a part of who we are. And I know, like, part of that is being birthed out of trauma, right? Like, we couldn't worship with white people, so we went and did our own thing.
That's right.
And some of the stuff that we're doing is to show people that we're able to organize, have our own institution.
Absolutely.
And in the words of Dr. Gardner C. Taylor, this is the independent institution that we have in America that no one owns.
That's right.
Right?
That's
I get all of that, but on top of that stuff is the stuff underneath that we don't want to show people, which is the things that you're saying we need to uproot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that was really, you said a lot of things in there too, because I don't want to take away from the fact that from our African ancestry, that there's a way that we express ourselves emotionally, and we can ascend to higher levels in the spirit when we are emotional, but you don't have to go there.
Right.
And I think that what some people confuse is that every Sunday we got to give you something for you to go there. But when you go to that higher place with God, you ought to leave differently. And sometimes when you go to that higher place with God, God ought to be whispering, now when you leave this church, I want you to do A, B, and C. Because praising God and worshiping God is about being a new creation. It's not about coming in here just to raise your hand and clap and say, yes, Lord, I believe. But then you go outside of here and your actions are not belief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, this is good. And you talked about Africanism and being able to go up and the way that we worship. I was here when you reopened, and we're going to get to that story. And people asked me, how was it? And I was like, it was good. I was like, that's the most blackest African Presbyterian service church I ever have gone to. Yeah. So, I got the piercing question of how did you end up being Presbyterian from Mississippi when we know most black folks in America are Baptist, Methodist, or Pentecostal? So
can I just say that was a high service for probably my kindred.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm fourth generation Presbyterian. I didn't just become because I love being Presbyterian in terms of the doctrine, the fact that I could question. I questioned everything as a kid, and my parents never told me, child, go somewhere and sit down. They tried the best that they could to answer. People in the neighborhood tried. And so I love Presbyterianism. And to be quite honest, when I go to churches and they're doing a whole bunch, I'm like, hey, don't take all that. At the same time, though, I can appreciate it. And because of my personality, I love dancing. I love my Africanism. I'm going to preach the way I want to preach. And I'm not always high when I preach. Sometimes I'm talking just like this. It's whatever the Spirit moves, because it's not performative. I know how to do the, as there's a certain way that we as black preachers, we know how to do the story and we know how to do the rhythm when it comes. Sometimes though, it just hits you and you're not even in your body, right? I know how to do all that. But for me, that service was a celebration of who we are as African people who are spirited people who believe in the God who got us through the pandemic, has gotten us through racism all of our lives, and who helped us to rebuild this church. And I also had just come from Ghana too. So I was full up.
I got you. Yeah.
When I came in, the outfit and everything I had on, I when I was in Ghana, I was like, I got to have my outfit, because for me, my Africanness is so important. It's so important. So I get to decide how I'm going to worship. And that day, I knew it was a mixed crowd. But what you're going to see in this church is the Africanness, because that's who we are as a community. Now, quite frankly, I have gone to some African-American Presbyterian churches, and we're just as stoic as the white churches. And I actually have a sister who, and as a matter of fact, she was here that day. She was probably sitting there thinking, does she have to do all that? Now, she didn't say that to me. She never said that to me, because maybe she's used to me by now. But I would always say, girl, you're going to miss a blessing sitting there. Just, just let it go, let it go, let it go. But not performative.
Right.
Right. It was important to me to usher in the ancestors with the beat of the drums, right? My ordination, I came in to the beat of the drums.
Wow.
And we were, and this was, again, the people on my committee or commission is what we do. The people in our presbytery, white folks. But when we marched in, they marched into the beat of those drums too, because this is who I am. And what I try to do is, my personality is going to be in anything that I do. I absolutely love dancing. And I will say to parishioners, I will say, like even at the gala we had, if you don't want to see me dance, you better stay home. Because for me, it's not about presentation. If God can see it, Now that doesn't mean, look, I have decorum.
Right,
But,
of course. Doctor.
Right.
TLC.
But it was important for me for folks to see who we
Yes.
are, right? And to have that lived experience. So I hope in addition, I hope the message was good too, but I hope you had fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I most definitely did. And so since we're talking about it, right, we need to dive into that. You had an amazing celebration, but it was not one that you wanted to have, right? We were in the midst of COVID pandemic, and you got a call that your church that you're pastoring in Springfield is on fire. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so what's really interesting, and you'll get this, Kenneth. I had just been saying to God, like, what's the vision for next year? Be careful what you ask.
Right.
Like, literally, I had just said the day before, and I wake up, I said, oh, well, I guess the vision is to rebuild this church. Or at the time, actually, it wasn't really sure what we were going to do. That day was just like a shocking day. And to get here and to find out that this was not the first time that this person had tried to do that.
Wow.
That was shock, number two. Those were difficult moments for the obvious reason, right? To know that based on the color of your skin, that someone is deciding that they are going to try to stop your voice, really. And for me as a pastor, it was more than just, coming up and seeing what was going on, but it was figuring out, how now do I minister to this congregation? And, having to gather us together on Zoom that night to just be together and to just hear people process. That was one thing. And then to think about, what is the sermon on Sunday morning? And also, what is the message to the world? So for me, there were a couple of things that were important, that we're going to always preach God's love. We will always preach forgiveness. And forgiveness requires people to be accountable also for their behavior. Because one thing, folks often want Black folks to really quickly jump to, we're going to forgive. Forgiveness is a process as well, right? We don't teach that. That's another psychological thing, but that is a process as well. And so for me, it was a matter of juggling a lot of things during that time, being out in front of the camera all the time, and then needing to make sure that I'm taking care of this particular flock that God has blessed me with.
And you got a building now that the inside is burned, right?
Right.
And you trying to figure out
destroyed.
how you gonna raise money,
all of that.
who's gonna help rebuild,
all of that, and that process in and of itself, it was overwhelming in the beginning with, like, how people responded, and I'm so grateful for what people did in the community. And thank God we also had insurance. But this building, to rebuild this, was a $2.5 million effort. And that's not including everything that went into it, but just sort of the rebuild. It then has to be refurnished and all these other things. So we were fortunate enough to get a grant, but that required me, pounding the pavement as well. One of my church members was able to apply for the ARPA grant. But then as a pastor, once that was applied for, you know what grant writing is like, you know what accepting. There's a lot that goes into it that divinity school did not teach us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so when people look at us as pastors, they're thinking about what you do on a Sunday morning, but all the other stuff that goes behind it. So it has been a long process. The person has still not been prosecuted, but they're in maximum security, but he's not been found competent to stand trial. And I think that's important for the audience to know, because that is still in the background, right? We've had to go in and to face looking at him, to keep getting things extended and extended and extended. It has been 6 years.
My goodness.
Right? So I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
No, I appreciate you saying that. I think it's important that we're here in this building. And when I thought about the celebration, yes, I expected dancing, because anybody who's gone through not only what you've gone through as a leader, but what the community has gone through. Just coming out of COVID is one thing, but then coming out of COVID and trying to figure out where you're going to worship, and then have a whole building project during COVID.
Absolutely.
And so that's a whole lot on one person. And I know you had a team. I know everybody has a committee. Black folks in churches, we got a team committee, deacons or whatever we want to, however the lay leaders are named. But I think to your point, a lot of it was still on your shoulders.
Absolutely, it was. And I think what's interesting is I don't think people realize how much is on the leader's shoulders. I mean, I know that you know.
Yes.
But I don't think people have a clue of the late nights, the early mornings, emails where you're trying to write to people about this and do that. I mean, and life is still going on.
Oh, yeah.
As you're doing that. And we didn't stop. We actually had a couple of workshops around trauma in the Black community, and we dealt with mental health things. We had church in a gym. That wasn't the greatest thing in the world. We are very grateful for the Martin Luther King Community Presbyterian, not Community Presbyterian, the Martin Luther King Community Center allowing us to have that space. They were very generous, but that worship was a whole different experience. And and then to deal with the congregations, there's a I don't even know if I want to say malaise. Yes, we're worshiping and we're rejoicing, but you can just tell when you're also going through
heaviness.
Right? It's yes,
yeah.
Because it's been so light since we've been back in this building. I've seen like the lightness, and on top of that, you got people dying.
Life still life.
You have this pandemic of racism that was happening, and I was very much involved and out there and speaking and being in protests and all that. And that's why I can look back now and say, God, you show enough. And I use that because it's a Black thing to say show enough.
Especially from Mississippi and Georgia.
Like,
show enough.
You show enough a good God,
yes,
right?
Yes.
I know the correct thing to say, and it's how I was raised to speak correctly, but I know that if I say to you, show enough, you know that is going to a place that is really, you can't even explain it.
Right.
Because when I think about what God brought me through, let alone talk about what God brought the church through. But the rebuilding of this, and we don't owe a mortgage.
Don't get me to shine.
That is phenomenal.
Yes, Lord.
And again, divinity school didn't teach me
Yes,
any
Lord.
of this.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for all the support from the community, other pastors. But I will tell you this, so there was support and there was a lot of just learning in the moment, because other people's lives move on as well. So while in the beginning, there was a lot of like giving me, 2 cents, 5 cents, $1, right? Like in terms of the opinions.
Right.
I don't mean in terms of donations, excuse me, but I mean, people had things to say, and that was overwhelming too, for everybody to flood you with an opinion all at once. But for the long haul, they're the faithful few that you're able to go through, because it's just like, and you will get this, right? It's just like when you're as a pastor and you have a loved one to die. As a pastor, people are praying for you temporarily and they're holding that space for you. But a week later, or 2 weeks later, pastor, blah, 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 blah. Now, I don't know what they do privately. They still might be praying for you, but the needs are there and you have to keep moving.
Yeah. Wow. So what was the sermon like that Sunday after you found out all the stuff that happened? What did you say to try to encourage your people?
If I remember correctly, the sermon was, joy comes in the morning, in the MOURNING.
That's good.
See, that's the psychology part that I needed to bring in there. I said, we're not going to be too quick to rush through. This is trauma. And so we have to mourn. And it gets back to your question earlier about funerals. We have to mourn. We have to weep. We have to wail. Isn't that what Jeremiah talked about? Like those wailing women. And then, Jesus even talked about the weeping women, right? Let us not rush through this, but let us deal with the fact that we could have been in this church. And, something that I actually haven't said a lot publicly, but that person actually was scoping out this church, and I believe had been in this church before.
My goodness.
Right? And the lesson for all of us is, you don't ever know who's in your church.
Yeah. That is so true. I mean, we all soft targets, and we're almost to the end of this interview, but I have to ask this question. This was a death. The fire was a death.
Absolutely.
For your congregation.
Yes.
And even though God has blessed you with a beautiful edifice, I'm sure there are folks who still remember what it used to look like.
Absolutely. And you know how we are in church anyway, with holding on to the old.
Yes.
But what we have tried to do, or at least what I have tried to do in my messaging, is to, yes, we're going to deal with the death of what we lost, and that we also know that in the process of something dying, there's a rebirth as well. And so what is God trying to work out in us now that we have gone through that dying process? And let's also be honest, some things need to die. And so we've had to do that too, to take a look at what needed to go and what do we need to bring forth in this day and time. And so I want to just say this about the COVID experience. The fact that we were worshiping online actually helped us because we didn't have a church building to go through to that next Sunday. The fact that we had already been worshiping online, we didn't miss a beat. But if this had happened when it wasn't COVID, we would have felt so displaced and lost.
Wow.
So that I think, is something that needs to be said. And at the end of the day, the thing that I can lay my hat on is that all things work together for the good. Not all things are good, but all will work for the good, and that I can continue to trust God even as I go through my ugly periods of faith or whatever the issues are. I can continue to trust God through that process, and God is going to be okay with me being transparent.
That's awesome. I mean, this whole entire time, I've received nothing but freedom. Like you bring this spirit of freedom. This is what it is. This is who I am. When I feel like dancing, I'm going to dance because I'm free.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to perform for you every Sunday. I'm going to be what God has called me to be. And I'm so appreciative. And thank you for sharing that. Just one last question, as we do every time we do an interview. In this season and all that we're seeing, it's chaotic right now. Seems like we can't find peace in this country. What does it mean to sound the trumpet?
Well, so that's a really good question. And I want to say that I can find peace because my peace isn't tied up in all that's going on in the world. So that's the first thing. But what we can do to sound the trumpet is to find what our voice is in this place and time, so that I'm an advocate for dismantling racism. There are a lot of other things that are going on out here that we need to talk about at this current time as well. But I know that my gift is dismantling racism. So I would tell everybody, find the thing that you are passionate about, and that's the thing that you sound the trumpet on. You may not do it on a radio show. You may not do it from the pulpit, but you can do it in your community. You can do it in your home. But we as leaders, we as Christians, we as people of faith, we as people who are just moral beings, we need to be speaking up and speaking out, and that means educating the people who are around us, and some of those people are right in our families. That's how we sound the trumpet.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. TLC. Once again, thank you so much for allowing us to interview you. For all those who are listening, please go and subscribe, share, comment on our page. A few things I want to share with you. We have a Sound the Trumpet Preaching and Leaders Summit on June 27th. June 27th is all day. Right now we're in early bird registration, which is $35. Later it's going to be a little bit more than that, so you want to go ahead and get the early bird by May 12th. And that is a group rating as well. You can find me at IMK Michael on Instagram, and Facebook is Kenneth Young. Dr. TLC just received a book award, and we need to know where we can find your book. Where can we find you on social media? We know you're here at MLK Community Presbyterian Church, but where can we find you on social media? Where can we find your writing, your teachings? She takes folks to Ghana, and she does a whole lot of things outside of this place. How can we get in contact with you?
So real quick, so the book, if you're local to Springfield, there are plenty of books here at the church, so they can always come. I invite people to go to their local bookstore and request them, because we want to, make sure we're supporting our local bookstores. And then you can also find them in the usual places as well, Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. You can find them there as well. But the other thing is, you can find me on Facebook as well. You can go to sacredintelligence.com. You can learn a lot more about me if you go to sacredintelligence.com. Facebook to Terrlyn Curry Avery or Sacred Intelligence. I'm not great with Instagram, but I should be better. And I just want to say about the book, I won 2 book awards, one for my book on dismantling racism and one for my book of prayers. So I invite people to check those out as well.
Yes, go check out all of our stuff, book on prayer, a book on dismantling racism. And if you're intrigued in thinking about going to Ghana or going to Africa and learning more, it's not just a trip for African Americans. She takes all people over there and learn about everything that happened before people set foot here in America. Please contact her. Do you have like an email or something people can get in contact?
Yes, actually, but if they go to sacredintelligence.com, all the information is there, but they can also go to Terrlyn, Terrlyn at sacredintelligence.com.
All right. So if you have any questions, please do that. We are excited about the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for having us
Thank you.
in this sacred space and opening up the sacred space for us. If you want to support, you say, I didn't know anything about a fire or any of that, you can also connect with her and she can help put you in the right direction to still support what they're doing here in the Springfield community. Once again, we're so grateful to have you all with us, and we thank you for sharing in the Sound of the Trumpet interview. God bless you.